Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. In today's video I'm going to be watering some plants. It's basically the normal pots run and they're due a flush, so it's a nice easy one. And before you all run to the hills, I've replaced the glass bowl with a plastic one. So instead of lots of clanging, we'll have lots of clackety-clack, plastic on plastic, hopefully reducing the noise level dramatically. The idea is this is a bit of a combination because it's almost like the one shelf, one rack at a time, except for it will go over more than one shelf. We can stop and have a look at the plants briefly as I go past them. My basic principle is to bring a plant over, water it, put it on the table. Next one, until I finish the shelf, then I put them all back and move on to the next shelf because the table will be clear. The bits where I put them back I will stop the camera for, but we'll have a look at the plants as I bring them across. So I'll drop the camera down. Not crash on the floor, drop it down, just drop it down so that you can sort of see what I'm up to. Is that somewhere near it? Yeah, that looks about right. Now, I haven't watered using this before. It might just fall on the floor and not work, but we'll give it a try. Right, first plant. Now, my scissors are soaking in alcohol at the moment for this very reason. There are some of the plants that need these brown leaf tips, which we discussed in the last video, just trimmed off. And because I'm going from one plant to another, I would rather that they were sterilised in between. So that's the idea of that. And then we will need some water. Now the method that I do reuse water, but not a drastic amount. So the idea is we put some water in there and then we water the plants. Now because this plant had brown tips, I would suggest it's drying out a little too much in between. So that's had a little bit more water than it would normally have. Yeah, so hopefully it will stay wet that little bit longer. By adjusting the water, what I've done really is just pour more in more than once. If I wanted to give that a light watering, I'd have just poured a little bit round the edge and stopped. Yeah, so that's had a bit more water than normal. That is an Oncidium species, Oncidium cheiriforum. It has lots of new growths coming, so it's coming back into growth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 I can see, so 5 new growths. Not growing very well, that one. That's my Vanda, that's not getting watered, it's still wet. It got done yesterday, so that's just on the floor for now. This is a little bulbophyllum that's not doing very well at all. I don't think it likes being in the moss, quite honestly, and it's still quite wet. So that won't be getting any water. It needs either doing something with it or I'm going to lose it. It's rotting. I mean, that's a perfectly good leaf that's rotted off. It's staying too wet in that moss. Chances are it's a warmer grower. Yeah? Next. Dendrobium, obviously, and this is a Latoria type, I believe. Dendrobium Aussie's Sweetness crossed with Tapiniense, which is a species. It grows okay, but it's never bloomed. It's got loads of roots in there, it's a bit pot bound, and it has a lovely strong new growth starting. Chances are there will be another new growth at the other end of the plant. With a root system like that and a big plant, this is drying out reasonably well in between, but it's now growing. Yeah, so it's in active growth. Not bloomed for me, that one. Next, so I'm just going to move the dehumidifier that'll keep kicking. Right, this is a Coelogeny. relatively recent one. This is Coleogyne speciosa Burnham. I wonder where that came from then. This is not growing actively at the moment, but it should be. So I'm not giving it a tiny amount of water, but I am restricting the water to the outside edges of the pot. So that's not getting absolutely soaked because it's not actively growing. It has recently grown the 2 large leaves. So it has been, but it isn't now. Another Coleogyne. Now this one is growing, yeah? So this one is pushing out a new leaf with some new roots. This is Coleogyne, it's Usitana crossed with salmon something or other, and it's a very badly written label. It was bought off a private seller at Burnham's. So this is in active growth. I would suggest the pot it's in is far too big for the size of the division, far too big. So I haven't soaked that, I haven't drowned it basically, I've just given it a relatively light water. In active growth, but not going mad. Ugh. Another Coleogyne up here. This is a good one for you to see. It's got a rotting bulb, you'd think, wouldn't you? It's hollow. It's completely disintegrated. That's unusual. Now this desperately needs repotting because the latest growths are pushing out high. So the previous growths have climbed. I did put some moss there to help, but it's not doing much good. So again, it's inactive growth. The pot's too big, and it will get a repot in due course. This is Coleogyne nitida, although on the on the label it says Orchid super, but it would now be nitida. It's been reclassified, and we've got one leaf to come off and one leaf tip to come off. That's not too bad. So that's that one done. Next, right, so that's the front shelf of the pear. Now we move on to the back bit. Dendrobium, obviously, pot bound, they like it like that, and that is Dendrobium banana chocolate. 2 nice strong new growths, lots of roots. Nonetheless, although they like to be potted quite tight, and the reason this one's potted tight is not really for the health of the plant, but it is. This is a warmer grower, yeah, being a Phalaenopsis type. It's a warmer grower, and I can't provide that heat in the winter. So these 2 canes are growing very, very slowly. As a consequence, the small pot helps not getting the roots too wet in the winter when the growth is slow. As the temperatures rise, so I poured quite a bit of water on that, but it's not that wet. There'll be parts of that pot that are still dry, so I don't drown it because the rots on these root easily, and the roots rot easily if kept too cold. So that's that one. Next we've got Spectabile. This is never going to do very well here. This is a warm grower, warm to hot, some class this as, but we do have some new growths coming, and there is a possibility of a bud that might extend. The bud itself has been there for a while, but it's changed colour recently and it's showing green, so we might get a bloom on that. It has actually bloomed. Now this gets very little water in its natural environment. This is a species. This comes from quite arid areas where it doesn't get much rain, so it doesn't get much water. Got another new growth over here, so that's got nice green leaves on. and another 2 or 3 coming on there. So it is growing. I'm surprised, but it's never going to do well here, not in these temperatures. Now we get to silliness, and we get to the point where this plant, I don't put this one on the table, I put it back where it comes from because it sits at an angle like that with something supporting one end to keep it upright, because if I put the plant upright you can see it's very lopsided. Nobly type, Sweet Pinky, Momoko. I don't take it out of the pot, it's jammed in there with a rock, literally because it will fall over. The drop of a hat, this will fall over. So it's contrived. Now this isn't actively growing at the moment. That looks like it got quite a bit of water, but it didn't. That's a big pot. Yeah? That water won't have even got down to the bottom of the pot. It will gradually filter down through. Recently come into bloom. Latest 2 growths over here. They've finished growing. It should come into growth at the base soon. But very attractive blooms on this one. Lovely blooms. Very large for a nobly type. What's that one? As I said, that has to come back over here on its special pot tray, otherwise it falls over. Right, another Coelogeny, bigger one this time. Now that's in a pot more suited, yeah, because the plant is sort of filling the pot, and that's how they like to be. But as a consequence, the latest 2 growths are right on the edge of the pot, and many of the roots are aerial, therefore the plant probably isn't hydrating as well as it should, and we can tell it's not because we've got some brown tips to snip off. Not too bad, but there's a bad one there. That is a very old leaf. And then we've got another one here. I'll show you this. This is a trick that you can use to make your plant look a little nicer when you cut the leaf off. Come in from one side like that to the centre, and then come in from the other side to the centre. And what you've done is you put a point on the leaf, and when it gets down in amongst the other leaves it looks more natural. It doesn't look like it's been sawn off. If you can be bothered, basically. It's not a necessity. But it just improves. And what some people do with their scissors is they do it on a curve. Quite a long sloping curve from either side, and then it really does round it off, and it looks quite natural. So this one again is jammed in a pot to stop it falling over. It is maturing 2 latest growths. So it's not in full active growth, but it is growing. And as a consequence of being in a small pot and not properly hydrating because it climbed, and a lot of the roots, at least the base of the roots, have become aerial. So this is on the list for a repot. The Coelogenes don't like their roots being disturbed, so it will disturb it. But it's got a good root system, it should be okay. So that's that one, and that is Coelogeny Lawrenceana. Nice plant, that one. Haven't had that too long. And then the last one on this shelf, I just water and put it back because it's a bit big. It's a bit big. Now this is Moriana variety Magnifica, which was an awarded plant. Now this is got a new growth coming out at the back of the plant, so that's a new lead here. Yeah, it's got a growth maturing there, another new growth here, and then coming around here it's got a growth maturing here. So it's sort of in active growth. It has definitely got one active growth on it. Again, if it starts to climb and it gets aerial roots, it won't hydrate properly, and these suffer from lack of hydration quite badly. So before I get it soaking wet, we'll deal with the brown leaf tips. Not too many. There's two. Sure there was a third. Or if there was, I can't see it now. Any I miss I'll get next time, so just the two on that, which isn't bad for the size of the plant. But again, that's in a pot more suited to the plant. Yeah, the plant has almost filled the pot, and it's a relatively shallow pot, so the roots are going to fill that pot right down to the bottom. Being potted at Burnham's, it's probably got polystyrene chunks at the bottom as well, so it probably is well drained. It's inactive growth and it's a large plant, so it will get a good watering. Again, this is another one that they don't like to totally dry out, and if they do, they will get the shriveled bulbs and the equivalent of the Oncidium concertina leaves, which on these are bubbly, misshapen leaves. They can look quite bad, so I put that in the wrong place, and then that just goes back where it was. So I'll close down now and we'll move on to the next shelf, because that's that one done. So that's the whole of the top shelf on the back here. So I'll be back. Right, to move around to the next shelf, this is Dendrobium Victoria Regina. Latest cane is still in active growth, although slowly, and there's no signs of new growth at the base yet. This has never been repotted since I got it, I don't think. Highly unlikely, because it's got polystyrene chips in the bottom, which I wouldn't do. I've got a feeling I might have potted it on, just lifted it out and put it in a bigger pot. But it's on the list to be repotted because the media is very old. Again, it's in active growth, but it's not growing mad. It is gently pushing this cane up, so it's not going to use a lot of water. Next we've got a biggie that won't stay upright, it has to lean on something. Black hair type, no ID. Latest cane here has a bud. So it's finished growing now. Older canes have all bloomed, and this cane that went out sideways, I should have strapped that up basically. You're pushing my luck to pull it in now. That's got buds at the apex and another one down below, down there. Again, finished growing. So what this is doing is growing buds rather than canes. So this would benefit from the low nitrogen feed, because that will push on the buds and spikes. But it's on a flush run at the moment, so it's not getting any. Now this is in quite a large pot for a Dendrobium, but it grows big roots. And again, the fact that it's in a black pot implies that I haven't repotted it since I got it. So it's due. I will probably wait for the next pair of new growths on that, because it should push out a new growth from both leads. Probably the best thing to do. That'll be after it blooms, so it's not going to be soon. 3 months maybe, possibly even 4. This is a little Oncidium Nelly Isla that's not doing very well, but it's not dead and it does have a new growth. So it is growing, but it's not going mad, and it doesn't have very good roots. So it gets a trickle. It gets a trickle around the edge so that I don't drown the whole pot. Because without a very good root system, it wouldn't use the water up. Yeah? So the few roots it has could be subject to rotting if that stays wet too long. Next one, Oncidium type. Is it an Oncidium? Is it? It's a Cambria. Well, that's what it had on the label. It is a Cambria, which is a generic term. Mass-produced type plant. It's grown some nice bulbs, nice and fat, with some nice healthy leaves. There's one manky leaf on the whole plant, and that's an old one. That's not a brown tip job, that is an old leaf dying back. That is not a problem. It's on virtually the oldest bulb. Another new growth starting here at the back of the plant, which is unusual. This has the most gorgeous blooms on it. Odont type like this, shades of purple. So it blooms really well. And it was a rescue plant for quite a while. It is now rescued. It is now growing. It does have roots. So you can count that as a success. So I'm just looking down here. You've got another new growth starting there. So that's right up against the side of the pot, but it will push the bulb back. So I'm not going to adjust it in the pot. That was badly potted on my part. Why? Well, where's all the new growth? The new growth's around here. Why was this not pushed to the back? It was. There were two plants in here. This one died and left that space. Near. So whereas it looked like I got it totally wrong and potted it badly, I didn't. Right, last one on this shelf, another biggie. This is the other Coelogene Moriana. This is just the basic species. It has an annoying bulb, yeah, with leaves that stick out sideways. Now this has got more than enough leaves to cut those off, but I'm not sure. This new growth that's associated with that bulb is quite possibly a separate piece in this pot, so it gets to stay. New growths over here. That one's flowered, that one's flowered, that one's flowered. This one was blind and didn't flower, it won't now. This type of Coelogene pushes up a new growth. When it gets to about there, just as the leaves part, the spike will come out. If the leaves carry on and grow, it's not going to bloom, it's blind, which is what this one is. Again, new growths right up against the side of the pot. The pot's about the right size, but it's not potted well because, like I was trying to explain there, all the new growths are up against the edge of the pot. It's a bit of a climber, and quite a few of those new roots are not only going into the air, the tips are turning brown where they're not hydrated. So this is on the list to repot. Getting a bit shallow here. So it is in active growth, but it's in a pot that is half of that pot, or a third of that pot, doesn't need any water. There won't be any roots down the back end of that plant. So the water needs to go round where the growths are. So that's that one, and that's the end of that shelf. So again, I'll shut down. I'll be back when we move on. Okay, we start off with a failure. Basically, this has never grown roots. It's rootless. Yeah. On the latest growth, it started to grow roots and it started to push up a new growth which has rotted. So this is a failure. I'm throwing that out. It's never had roots since I got it. It was in bloom when I got it, and after it bloomed it pushed up a new growth. I had repotted it and it had no roots, and it's never grown any, so I'm going to dump that. It was Oncidium honeybee, so I'm just going to that can go out. It's just a waste of space. It looks like a dancing lady type, so nothing that special, quite honestly. Right, now we come over here. We've got my Renanthera, however you want to say it. This is starting, the roots are starting to grow. Unfortunately that one's going to come straight out of the basket, but there is some root activity going on in here, so it seems to be doing better than it was up in the bathroom in its previous setup, which just didn't work. Whereas now it does seem to have some root activity. The roots do seem to be coming back into growth. Providing some of them are in the basket and can hydrate, then it shouldn't do too bad. So that's that one. Right, I've made a mistake here and forgotten to put the previous plants back, so there's only a couple, I'll just pop those back. We don't need to shut down and start again, there was only a couple of them. But that is quite important to get them out of the way because of what's coming next. And what's coming next is a nuisance, but it's one of my favourite orchids, so it'll have to remain a nuisance. This is Hercoglossum, endearingly known as a tatty mess. It will get tidied up. When this starts to produce its buds, I will find the canes that are not going to bloom and they will get cut off. The problem with this is there is no new growth at the base. Now the base is quite dry. When you look at it at the top, it looks wet. It looks as though that pot's really soggy, but it's not. This is algae on the moss. Look down in there, it's quite dry. It has got some roots, but not many, and it has got some greenery on the top. So it's not dead by any means, and it is a deciduous type of Dendrobium. It loses its leaves in the 2nd or 3rd year. So there is nowhere near as much greenery on this plant as there should be for the size and age of the plant, and that's because the new growth's failed. So, is it growing? Not really, but it does have some green canes that are extending, but it's not growing much. But if I'm going to get it to come back into growth, we do need to keep those roots in the pot moist. So for an orchid that's not doing much, that seems like quite a bit of water. But I need to see that water go down the sides of the pot to where these roots are, so that I know they're hydrated. And because this one takes, actually I can see a couple of active roots in there as well, so we've got some root growth. But I need the base of the plant to start growing. I've got some keepies on the go, so if I do lose the mother plant, I've still got it, if you know what I mean. Right, this is my epidendrum. Not a happy plant. Not a happy plant at all. I was just looking if some of these canes can actually come off. No, we'll leave it. I mean, it has got a bud on it, but it's not a happy plant. It went downhill, and although it's sort of recovered, it's still not growing well. Need some more water. But it's doing better than it was. This was one that suffered really bad with the scale, that they really got into the plant and almost took it down completely. But it has grown a new cane here with some buds, and another new cane here, and another one here. So it's recovered, and another one down here actually. So it's, you know, it's coming back from the brink. Over here with the empties. I should need to get the RO unit on soon, which if my back was still playing up badly, that would be very difficult to do because it's all bending and lifting. But hopefully we've got away with that now. Right, next one is in a clay pot, and it shouldn't be because it's a cooler grower, and that leaf that I've just taken off, there's the reason why that leaf's not happy. It's covered in scale. It's the first scale I've seen for a long time. None of those will escape. They are all getting squashed. We'll have a look at where it came from. It hasn't really left many behind. You have a look at the rest of the plant, and there aren't any. There aren't any on the base. So that's in a clay pot, but that's Dendrobium roytocanaga. That is a Latoria type, which is a warm grower. And although it's grown some roots and it's not bad, those roots are subject to evaporative cooling. That's the latest new growth. That was the last one, leaf died, and that was the previous one. Non-bloomer at the moment, not doing very well, but the Latoria types probably never will in this place, it's too cold. Right, then we've got some little ones. This is, I always forget what this one is, Tetragonum. And we've got some leaf dieback on an old cane there. That's the latest new growth there. It's not doing very well, but it's not dead. We'll just keep it hydrated and see what it does. That hasn't bloomed for me. The state it's in at the moment is unlikely to. The next one I'm confident is dead. But I still keep giving it a trickle of water in the hope it might shoot out. And that is Trigonopus. I mean, the canes are still firm, but when I repotted it, it had virtually no roots. So it gets some water every other run. It didn't get any last time round because it was a feed run. So that's all I can do with that. I think it's dead, but I've seen Dendrobiums shoot out when they've been like that for months and months, and then they just suddenly start going again. This one is following it down the path. This is a Marbly, and it just won't grow. The last new growth it put up was quite good, but the top leaves died off, leaving one leaf and no new growths at the base. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with that. But I don't think that one's going to make it somehow. It needs new growths from the base, and there's no sign of anything at the moment. Maybe when the temperatures come up a bit, although I don't think that's a warm grower, maybe the temperatures and the longer days will get that one to shoot out. Who knows? Next we've got a biggie. This is an Antelope type. Again, this shouldn't be in here really. These are warm to hot growers naturally. This is a hybrid. It's Yarak Spider crossed with Discolour, which is a species. Growing in the wild, these can grow canes 1.5 meters long. They can get ridiculously big. Chances of me ever getting this to bloom are very slim, but it's growing, and the new cane has put on a lot of size. Now this gets a lot of water because I know what's in the pot, which you can't see. This came inside the coconut shell, yeah? And when I repotted it, I broke cut a third of the coconut shell off, leaving the rest of the plant and the roots embedded in what was left. The idea being that the roots can escape through the bits that I cut off. This latest cane here grew its roots down into the media, so it has got roots into the media. Doesn't like standing upright, that thing. It likes to lean on something. The next one is the Encyclia Green Comet crossed with Epidendrum Miva Etoile B in quotes. It's basically a Prostetia type. Buds are pushing on, showing their colour now. I say showing their colour, that these blooms are almost black. Not been repotted since I got it. It has a pot full of roots, and again this one would benefit if it was getting any feed from the low nitrogen feed, because that's all that's growing at the moment is those buds. But as I said, this is a flush run, so it's not getting anything. It's got a pot full of roots, even though I can see they're there, if you know what I mean, even though it's not in a clear pot. It's on the list to be repotted, just so that I can get it in a clear pot, if nothing else. It's that one. And then the last one on the top shelf here. Let me just have a shuffle around here. Need to make some more room. We'll see why in a minute. Right, this is another Oncidium intergeneric type. Oncidium Cheyenne, has nice red blooms, I believe. One growth pushing on, the other one failed. It did push two out. Providing this grows on and forms a reasonable bulb, I need to see what happens with the next growth, because that's not the first time it's grown distorted bulbs. So I think there might be something inherently wrong with that. It could be a genetic disorder, I don't know. Some of these intergenerics just don't work. Literally, there's like contradictions in their makeup, where we've got part of the genes are trying to do one thing and something else is trying to do something different, and they just don't work properly, they just don't grow well. And that's one of them that I think might be of that ilk. Right, so we're down on the shelf below now, but I do these two shelves together. This is my last remaining Miltoniopsis, which has virtually had it. Does have a new growth. The previous new growth didn't mature properly. It does have roots in the pot, but it just won't grow. So I may lose that, I don't know. That gets the tiniest amount of water because although these like to stay moist, they don't like to be soggy, and that's not growing enough to be classed as being in active growth. It does have a little tiny new growth starting. The problem with that little new growth is it's got nothing to work with. The plant is almost dead, so it's got no backup, it's got no reserves to draw on to sort of push on. And then the last one over here is silly. What do I mean by silly? Well, it's a two-handed job for a start. Now, this is Catatante. Actually, it's not. It's Catatante, why won't you bloom? Because it still hasn't. Plenty of new growths on here, maturing into lovely big bulbs. It's a smashing plant. It's a healthy plant, but it won't bloom. And it hasn't done yet. You know, these are new growths. This is lovely, substantial new growths. The previous one pushed out two. They're nice and strong. Pot full of roots. Yeah? It just won't bloom. There's new growth down in the middle of the plant as well. Now, part of the problem, you'll see, is it's filled the pot. What happens when you pour water in? Can you see it running down into the pot? Because I can't. You just have to keep pouring water down the sides, and eventually it shows wet down through the pot. But it's very, very difficult to hydrate this plant. Very difficult. I even have to pour some down the middle, because it's right up against the edge of the pot and the water just won't go down in there. So it desperately needs to go into a bigger pot. That disturbance of actually putting it in a bigger pot could trigger blooms. I know that might sound daft, but it's very settled in its ways. And giving it a bit of disturbance, some say, can actually induce a plant to bloom. So it's on the list to get repotted. It needs a bigger pot. At the moment I haven't got one. Right, so that's that stack. We're now moving to the mobile shelf, as I call it. I'll show you in a minute, but we'll cut off there for now. Okay, I'll show you what I mean by the mobile shelf. What I have to do is I pull this out across there, and then this shelf on its coasters just gently slides out of there and comes round here. Go very gently, a sudden movement or a bump up against something could send plants flying all over the place. So that is now there, which allows me access to that lot so that I can water that lot. Okay, so that's what I do. Now I'm not going to film much more today because I'm actually going to stop watering soon, and basically I'm doing a bit of bending, a bit of twisting, yeah, bit at a time. So I will finish this shelf off. We'll just do this one. See, just getting down to there is bending, so I need to go careful. So when I've done this section I'll stop, and then I will start over there tomorrow. I might film that as well, because this is like an update going around everything, isn't it? Now this little Arangus, since it was potted, is coming back into growth. There's growth signs showing in many places. So it's happier in the pot than it was on the mount. Now the mount that it was on, the moss that it was in, was on there when I got it. So it would have been very, very old and stale and possibly gone acidic. So getting those roots, there were some, it did have some roots, into fresh media, seems to have turned the tide with this one, and it seems to be perking up. That lives there under the shade of the cymbidiums, because it is actually a shade lover, one of the few that I've got that I do actually keep shaded. Right, so we're on to this mobile shelf now, as I call it, because it moves. This Paphiopedilum, I've read up on it. It is very reluctant to form roots, and sometimes can take 2 years to produce roots on the latest growth. Now this is still wet, so it's not using the water up, and it's because it hasn't got a decent root system. However, it's pushing its new growth on, probably taking a lot of its resources from the existing growth. So that, I can't tell you what it is because it's the one with the ridiculously long name, too big to even create a tag. But it's not getting watered, it's still wet. And then we've got this strange Paphiopedilum. Now I haven't repotted this since I got it. Very few roots, and I'm going to declare that one still wet as well. You've got to go steady because that leaf there is rotting. It's staying wet too long. Now that came from another place, came from a friend, and quite honestly it's not happy. I think that needs to come out of that media. I think that's my media, so I've put it in there thinking it'll be okay, and it's not. I think that needs to go in something that dries a lot quicker, but it's still wet, so it's not getting watered. So that's 2. The other path on here, Blackjack, that will definitely be dried out. Yep, and that's because it's got a good root system. Got spiders' webs all over it. Tiny little spiders living on. Oh, it's got a lovely new growth there, look, coming up. So that's good. This is a nice new growth here. And that's the last one that bloomed. So we've got some new growths coming. They will also start to produce some new roots. But this has got such a good root system that if the new growths don't provide any new roots, it doesn't actually matter because it's got more than enough. Well, honestly, all my visits to shows and other people's growing areas and stuff, I don't remember seeing a path with such a good root system. It's still growing. There's still active root tips on there. Some water in the leaf joints. That's Roger's patented method of getting water out of leaf joints. It's called huff and puff. Sharp blast of air and the water's gone. It's not dry, but the water's gone. That's the important bit. And then the last path, can't remember whether this one's got some roots. It's in a nice little pot. Yeah, this one's got roots, so this one's okay. That's dried out. Now it shouldn't do, but it's in such a tiny pot that it dries. New growth just coming on this one, and this is Villosum, variety Ambuonense. Again, I haven't had that one long. Where's my thingy gone? So this is in a small pot, and it has roots. So this one gets a soak-in, because it's in bark and it will dry, as you could see, quite quickly. So by giving it a good soak, it gives those roots a chance to soak up some water before it starts to dry again. It's quite a nice little root system on that one. So that's the Paphs. And the only two that live on here, all the rest are Masdevallias apart from these two. These are Zygopetalums. One of them was the subject of a brown leaf tip syndrome yesterday. So those are ex-brown leaf tips now. And we looked at this and decided that although it looks wet, it's not hydrating properly. And I think that media's going. So it is in growth, it has got roots, but it doesn't weigh anything. So again, it looks wet. Well, I think it's actually drying out, and it shouldn't be. So the media it's in is, if it's not going off, it is suitable for a zygo, but not if it dries out. So we'll give it a good water. They like to stay moist, zygos. They don't like to get dry, but they also like to grow in temperatures a bit warmer than what I've got. They're not a warm grower as such. I mean, some of them do come in cool, airy treetops, but not all. And then the other zygo is the one that produced the strange effort. It started to produce a new growth that was bent. It then decided to push a spike out. That's not normally where spikes come out on zygos. They come out near the base. And I cut the spike off. I thought it's not strong enough to support that spike. Whereas now it's got a nice strong new growth coming with some new roots coming out and another growth coming out the side there. And it has a good root system in a media that with my watering cycle is not quite dry when I get to it. So it's not drying out like that other one, and as a consequence hasn't got brown leaves. So if you've got a good root system on a zygo and you repot it incredibly gently, they actually seem to do better in a larger pot than you would think. Now that pot is quite large for the size of the plant, but look at the roots. It's got a good, they tend to be very chunky roots on zygos, and they're incredibly fragile. They don't look it, but they are. They not only snap really easy, they bruise, and then that section of the root becomes non-functioning, dysfunctional, whatever you want to call it. Right, so that's that mobile unit done. As I said, the rest of them are Restrepias and Masdevallias. They're not in this run. They're in the cooler, shady set that get watered on a different frequency. And the next thing is that giant shelf in the corner. I may start filming that tomorrow. I haven't got anything else to film tomorrow, so I don't know how much people enjoy this type of video, looking at individual plants relatively quickly, quick chat about them. Maybe that's enjoyable for some people, probably not for others, but there isn't much else going on at the moment, so that may well be what I will film tomorrow. We shall see. Anyway, thanks for dropping by, having a look at some plants. I mean, that's gone double shelves there. The bottom shelf there is Odonts, so not in this run, and Restrepias. Double shelf there, but the bottom shelf is Masdevallias, so that didn't get done. Double shelf there, we did those, and the third shelf down is Odonts, so they're not in this run. And then when we get round into this corner, we've got a right assortment in there, all sorts. Even a couple of Cattleyas, some of the few that I've still got, not many. It's just too cold in here in the winter, they don't like it. Anyway, that was that, and for those of you who don't know, quite honestly, if you followed Rick L, then you probably subscribe to his channel, so you will know through your notifications that he started not only posting videos again, but he's got some orchids on the go. So his latest video is repotting an orchid and, and having a chat about it. So he's back up and running. For those of you who are interested, pop across to his channel, Rick L Orchids, and take a look. If you look back through his channel, if you're interested, there is a wealth of information on nutrition, feeding orchids, feeding and watering. It was a bit of a speciality of his. He had worked in horticultural hydroponic type environment, which is why he pots the majority of his orchids, well, he did, and he seems to be starting again, in inorganic media, things like river rocks and lava rock and stuff like that, because he's got full control of the nutrients and doesn't have to worry about the media having an effect on his nutrients like I have to think about. Things like pH, well, if it's an inert media, there is no pH to think of. The only pH you need to worry about is the pH of the water you're actually using. And I would imagine Rick uses rainwater anyway. So anyway, he's up and running again. Do take a look. He's got one of those voices that's just nice to listen to. It's difficult to explain. Some voices are not that nice to listen to, but you put up with them because of the information you want. This is just a nice, pleasing voice to listen to, and the words are good stuff as well, so you've got the best of both worlds there. And I will see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.